You're listening to the Fix the Money, Fix the World show
on the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast network.
Here's your host, Luke Mikic.
Welcome back to the podcast, guys. Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope you guys had a good little Christmas break and holiday break there. To anyone out there still doing the fiat mining, it is 2022 as I'm recording this one, so you should all be back at work. Today we're going to be introducing a video I recorded with the first Bitcoiner to ever take the banks to the courts, okay? This is an Australian Bitcoiner who's actually become the first Bitcoiner around the world to sue the big banks for debanking him just for using Bitcoin and quote-unquote crypto services. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to also be talking about what is going on in Australia, or as I like to call it, the Australian gulag, or the open-air prison that is Australia, because a lot of people have been asking what's going on. You've got Bitcoiners getting debanked from the banks in Australia. Meanwhile, on the other side, you've also got the largest baseball team in Australia, the Perth Heat, adopting a Bitcoin standard. And then you've also got the largest bank in Australia telling customers they can now buy Bitcoin in the app. So a little bit of conflicting messages coming out of Australia. So I am interviewing a fellow Australian Bitcoiner. I recorded this one many weeks ago, but it's a little bit of a timeless interview. So I'm sure you guys are really going to enjoy this one. Before we get into it, we better hear from today's show sponsor, who is Coinbase. Do you need Bitcoin support? Well, you can book a one-on-one video call with a Bitcoin pro on Coinbase Connect. You can ask questions about Bitcoin mining, self-custody, how to set up a multi-sig setups, how to run a full node, how to set up the Lightning Network, and how to accept Bitcoin payments. Simply go to coinbase.com, select a pro, and find a time when you're available. It's that simple. Learning about Bitcoin has never been easier. Go to coinbase.com today. Welcome back to the Fix the Money, Fix the World podcast, guys. Today, I'm pleased because I have a fellow Australian on the podcast with me today in Allan Flynn, who has probably one of the more fascinating stories in the Bitcoin space at the moment. So firstly, I suppose we'll get into that later. But Allan, thank you so much for coming on, my friend. Really nice to meet you.
Welcome, Luke. I'm pleased to join you in the podcast for sure.
No worries. I've been looking forward to getting into this one, but maybe we should start with your background, because I suppose that'll lead us into the battle that you're engaging in most recently. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background, what you're doing before you found Bitcoin, and then maybe that'll lead us into your Bitcoin journey.
Right. My background is commercial architecture. I was practicing for 25 years as a project architect in various commercial firms, working on all sorts of projects. And I was actually working across the road from the Royal Australian Mint, and lunchtimes I used to go over there and check them out minting coins. And so I became fascinated by the story of money, and especially hard money. And that one thing led to another. And I started researching and blogging about precious metals and decided that's what I wanted to do. So I left commercial architecture in 2014 and started traveling across America once a year for the next 4 or 5 years. And one year, while I was couch surfing throughout America doing my research, I met this guy who was trading Bitcoin. He introduced me to Bitcoin. He said, "You should get into it. You could support your research." And so when I got back to Australia, I signed up on local Bitcoins, and in 2017, I started operating a micro digital currency exchange. So yeah, that's how I got into digital currency trading in Australia.
You got a really nice kind of onboarding into the Bitcoin space. Most people aren't interested in money at all before they find Bitcoin. So that's nice that you were kind of interested in precious metals beforehand. I was a fellow gold bug myself before finding the superior digital gold in Bitcoin. But so you lived across the road from the Royal Mint.
I was working across the road from the Mint. In Canberra. So it's what's called an institutional area. So it's an area of the national capital set aside for small institutions and businesses. So that's where the company I was working for was housed there. Probably 20 employees, something like that.
Oh, that's really interesting. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your Bitcoin trading business that you were operating between 2017 and 2019, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it was some people call local Bitcoins peer-to-peer trading, but it's not really. Local Bitcoins is like the oldest escrow service that facilitated Bitcoin trading way back. And what they do is they basically introducing buyers and sellers. So if you're someone who's interested in selling Bitcoin, you can set up a profile there, set up your ads, and if someone's interested in buying, and they might buy locally, you might meet someone and buy Bitcoin off them, face to face. That's how it started out, but things have progressed. But they're an escrow service, so they when someone sees a seller's ad and applies to buy a certain amount of that Bitcoin, the escrow takes that Bitcoin out of the seller's wallet and holds it until the payment is finalized as signaled by the seller, and then local Bitcoins releases that Bitcoin into the buyer's wallet. So it's like a custodial way of supervising the transaction, if you like. So it's not really peer-to-peer. There is a third party heavily involved. And that's how local Bitcoins works. But yeah, I was operating on there for 2 years as known as Canberra Bitcoin. And had built up several hundred clients over the time, and well north of probably a couple of thousand trades, 2,000-3,000 trades. Nothing huge, but definitely not a hobby. It was business, especially after I became registered as required by the law in 2018.
Yeah, you say it wasn't too large of an operation, but it certainly painted a target on your back from the largest banks in Australia. So maybe that'll lead us into why you stopped operating your exchange in 2019 and talk us through the struggles with that.
Sure. Well, so the banks have ways of detecting whether you're operating a digital currency business or not. A lot of them say that they don't actually target individual cryptocurrency traders, but that's not what everyone's experience bears out for sure. There's plenty of individual traders that have had their accounts closed, blocked, or whatever by Australian banks. But so the banks detect whether you're trading digital currency, in a regular business-like fashion. It's not hard to set a watch up on your transactions for picking up that sort of thing. So it wasn't 2 weeks after I started trading on local Bitcoins that my first account was closed down, my first bank account, that is. And it was a progression thereafter. As a trader, you've always got to have another account on standby just in case you get closed down. And hopefully you can transition to that other account, but with another bank. But that's not always the case either. And sometimes you get noticed, sometimes you don't. And it was a progression of account closures. And then something didn't feel right to me because, I knew that the banks hated digital currency. Everyone knew that. Traders used to talk amongst themselves about, what to do. Most traders would open an account with a bank without necessarily disclosing what the purpose of that account was, and depending on the operation and whatever. But something just didn't feel right to me because I was operating a lawful business. There was nothing illegal about selling Bitcoin, in Australia, and so I thought, well, there's got to be a legal solution. So I went looking for a legal solution, and got my nose into the books, and I found out that the ACT has a unique discrimination law that protects you on the basis of your occupation. And so I determined after 2018, especially when I became registered as a digital currency exchange with AUSTRAC, that I wasn't going to skirt around the issue anymore. I would approach banks straight up and say, I'm a digital currency exchange, I'm registered, can I have an account? And so in 2019, I did that with two particular banks, and they provided me transaction account services, and I started trading, and I was over the moon because, I'd approached the bank. I'd given them the heads up what my business was all about. They'd given me an account. So I thought I can establish my business properly from here on, but that wasn't the case at all. It wasn't a couple of weeks until both accounts were closed down individually. So unfortunately, the front of house didn't know what the back of house was thinking, and vice versa, apparently.
Well, that's the most puzzling thing about you having all your accounts closed down. You're doing everything above board. You're registered, and like you say, there's nothing illegal about buying Bitcoin and just helping facilitate people buy and sell Bitcoin. There's absolutely nothing illegal about it. How many accounts overall do you think you've had shut down by the banking system?
Had about 20 separate accounts shut down. By no means is that a record. There is an Australian trader who is operating on local Bitcoins who's had north of 90 accounts shut down.
That's wild.
So I had 20, but I got to the end of the line. I thought, well, if I can't get an account being upfront and open, I can't continue trading. So that's how I decided it was going to be. So in December 2019. I couldn't find another bank to give me an account, and thereafter I approached north of 60 banks is all I could find in Australia, and I was turned down on every occasion.
That's absolutely wild. You may not have taken the cake and hold the record for having the most bank accounts shut down, but you are creating history in another way. I think, are you the first person to ever try and sue the banks for discrimination for debanking people due to cryptocurrency?
Yes, I am the first, because that law is only available in the ACT. There's no other states in Australia that have it's called a protected attribute. We're all familiar with the anti-discrimination attributes of race, gender, and age, and such forth. But the ACT has this unique one called profession, trade, occupation, or calling. So you can't discriminate against someone on the basis of their occupation in the ACT. And that's been tested once in the local tribunal. It was quite a few years ago, but not by a digital currency exchanger. It was tested by a sex worker. That protected attribute was designed particularly with sex workers in mind, but they quickly figured out it was going to apply to everyone that needed it in the ACT, but no one else has tested it since. And look, I've hunted high and low around the world over the last 2 years while I've been researching for these cases. I haven't found anywhere else with a protected attribute of occupation. However, that's shortly about to change in Victoria, because they're bringing under the Equal Opportunity Act a protected attribute of occupation. And so Victorians will soon have access to that facility as well.
That's reassuring for the Australian plebs in Victoria, because of late they certainly haven't had the government or any kind of regulation on their side. I'll leave it there, but that's good. They can protect themselves in another way. But yeah, so maybe walk us through the specific cases and the settlements and who you're suing. Obviously, don't go into any specifics that you can't, because you're still in it's still kind of ongoing in the courts. So don't say anything you can't. But maybe fill us in a little bit more about which banks and those the specifics of it all.
Right. So I lodged my complaints for the ACT Human Rights Commissioner against ANZ and Westpac in December 2019. And it took until August 2020 for the complaints to progress through the Human Rights Commission. They were closed without any, the Human Rights Commission attempt to conciliate between parties. That was unsuccessful in both cases. And so they were closed, and under the option, I was allowed to refer them to the ACT Discrimination Tribunal, and which is where they were until October, basically. So that they were both in the tribunal for a year. I was self-representing, progressing the cases through. And then in September, I appointed lawyers, and ANZ decided to approach and offer a settlement with 3 weeks to go before the hearing. And I accepted the terms of that settlement. And the Westpac case proceeded and was heard 2 weeks ago, over 2 days. And yeah, we're waiting on a decision from the tribunal. They've reserved. And so, yeah, I'm just sitting here waiting. I'm fascinated to see what the tribunal is going to make of it all. There's a number of issues that they've got to actually decide on. It's not just did the bank discriminate against Mr. Flynn. There's a whole bunch of other legal questions that have got to be answered.
So was that a small? Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
We can come back to it. We can come back to it.
No, keep going. What were you going to say?
Okay, so yeah, there's a number of legal questions that the tribunal's got to answer as far as the Westpac complaint goes. And the first one is, or one of the main ones is, do I possess the protected attribute? In other words, is my occupation really digital currency exchange, and is that a protected attribute under the Act? Another question is, does the ACT Discrimination Tribunal have jurisdiction over the matter? That's a biggie. Another one is another defense that the bank are claiming is that what they did okay, so the next one would be, did the bank treat me unfavorably in debanking me? And then another question is, was the bank acting reasonably by debanking me? And that will determine whether their discrimination was lawful or unlawful. And so that's called the 57N defence. So yeah, there's a number of questions to be answered, and tribunal certainly got their work cut out for them. There were 2 senior members presiding over the hearing, and no doubt they'll be working with each other to come to various decisions.
Well, we wish you all the best of luck with the battle there, Allan. So that little settlement you had with ANZ, is that a small little win? Are you able to now open up a bank account with the ANZ?
Yeah, well, my understanding was when ANZ debanked me, as many of the banks say, they will not ever provide you an account again under any circumstances with the bank. And which, you know, is does appear a little heavy-handed to some. However, in the settlement, ANZ have advised me that at no stage was I debanked for life, and I was certainly open to approach them and apply for another account on the basis of their terms and conditions and policies at the time. So I'm able to be considered for another ANZ account, but not a digital currency account, because their policy has not changed. So yeah, they haven't said that I can have an account. They've just said that I can apply for an account anytime. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, there was no money paid. ANZ settlement was based on an acknowledgement, a written acknowledgement that indeed there was a human rights case to be answered, human rights question to be answered, and yeah, they released a statement acknowledging that they closed my account on the basis that they detected I was operating a digital currency exchange, and without checking the details of my risk operations or management, they closed the accounts, and they acknowledged that under the Discrimination Act that could have been interpreted as unlawful discrimination, but without admitting any liability. So it was an extraordinary statement by all means. One international expert on financial inclusion has advised that no bank anywhere else in the world has ever issued such a statement. So I think it's moving the needle a bit in the debate, and certainly welcomed it. Look, in terms of the settlement, I accepted it because it just didn't make practical sense from my point of view as a unfunded, self-funded litigant, taking two major banks on in the courts, and paying for all you've got to, there's expenses, like lawyers don't come cheap, so it just didn't make sense to take two identical cases to the tribunal with 3 weeks to go. So basically, one outcome in one was more than likely to be similar in the other. So, yep, ANZ got first mover advantage, you might say.
Yeah, well, it's not just the legal expenses. I think when I was reading some of the articles about your case and your story, I think you mentioned in there you've had to take 12 months off work just to kind of train yourself up so you can represent yourself in the courts. What was that whole process like?
Well, yeah, I was doing all the research because I was the one that discovered, this law and its potential application to my circumstances. And so there was just a lot of research, looking up case law, trying to find precedent, trying to find, what the bank's particular policies were, a lot of media research, case law research. I employed law students to help me write submissions and papers and subpoenas and all of that. Look, it was a really busy time, and unfortunately, a lot of things had to go by the way. But when you believe in something, you certainly got to follow it through. So this is no exception for sure.
This kind of gets to another question I wanted to ask you. You going through all of this hassle, you must believe in the asset, the underlying Bitcoin itself. Well, what are your thoughts on how do you think Bitcoin's going to evolve over the coming 5 to 10 years? And how do you see it kind of changing the world and probably the financial system in particular?
Huge question.
Very, very loaded question. Sorry, mate.
Huge question. Look, and you can only ask that because I've got a bit of an interest in money. But look, for sure, Bitcoin is a superior asset in virtually every sense of the word. And look, my research on precious metals is morphing into, a text about Bitcoin for sure. And look, I'm going to call it, my book's going to be called The Surpassing of Gold. And throughout history, every measure of money by monetary authorities, anyone, always, gold is the standard, right? Gold is the test. Gold has been the test. I mean, you just got to look at every facet of our language to understand that throughout history, everyone's always compared everything to gold. I mean, we have gold medal winners in the sports. We have, the golden rule in terms of ethics. We have and anything government has ever done regarding money has always been in reference to gold. It's only very, very recently, since 71, as you're aware, that that monetary authorities have tried to move away from gold, but not always successfully. So look, my book's going to be called The Surpassing of Gold, and I think and it's going to be talking about every operation that monetary authorities have tried over the years to get away from gold, or get away from the constraints of gold, or try and replicate gold in some way or fashion. And when you think about it, Bitcoin really is a monetary authority's dream. I mean, it's the perfect substitute for gold in many measures. So look, and I've heard some people posit, for instance, that Bitcoin could have been designed by a government treasury. I mean, as a perfect way of overcoming the gold problem. And yeah, look, Satoshi certainly had these sort of things in mind when they were he was designing the system. So, they're my thoughts about the monetary qualities of it. And is it stoppable? It doesn't seem to be stoppable. I mean, every day we're hearing about how Bitcoin's just progressing, and it just does what it does, right?
Absolutely inevitable in my eyes, Alan. And I think another big reason I wanted to get you on the podcast today in particular was we just seen recently the largest bank in Australia, the Commonwealth Bank, who has, I think, 6 million customers. They've come out and said, you know what, you can buy Bitcoin in our app moving forward. So the absolute hypocrisy for you to go through the biggest banks in Australia debanking you for simply using their services for crypto trading. Now they're accepting Bitcoin themselves. So did you see that situation? And it certainly does look to be a step in the right direction for us over here in Australia with that kind of news.
Yeah, look, it was fabulous news and a bit of a shock to see one of the big four come out and suddenly declare they were going to enable their clients to on-ramp digital currency, Bitcoin and other digital assets. So it's going to be hugely interesting. We know there's a lot of competition amongst the big four, and we know there's a lot of follow the leader sort of thing mentality happening in their policies and whatnot. So just watch this space. I mean, by no means were Commonwealth Bank the first to get into digital currency, because Westpac were a major shareholder in Coinbase. Let's not forget that, from 2015 onwards. And their venture capitalists were on the record as saying that the reason why they got into Coinbase was as an insurance policy. So, but yeah, Westpac sold out of Coinbase at the IPO. So don't forget, now Westpac have this treasure chest of funds that they would probably be looking to deploy into the space again. So I wouldn't be surprised to hear something from Westpac in the near future about what they're going to do with digital currency. But the same goes for all of them. I've heard murmurs about ANZ as well. So look, we'll just have to wait and see what they're going to do. But look, I did think it was a bit rich that that a bank was turning down digital currency exchanges and digital currency businesses. And let's face it, I'm not the first person to suggest maybe there has been an anti-competitive element to it. The ACCC apparently looked into it in 2017 and found nothing. But the ACCC also looked into the debanking of foreign currency remittance services and found that that the banks certainly had no motivation to provide services to currency remitters. So, based on the fact that digital currency exchanges and currency remitters share exactly the same risk qualities, it's hard to imagine that the ACCC came to two different conclusions about the debanking of both industries.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So we've had the news with Commonwealth Bank, and then I think recently we've got an ETF launching in Australia shortly as well. So it looks as if things are changing pretty rapidly over here in Australia, and I wouldn't mind attributing some of that change to maybe you suing the big banks over being debanked from Bitcoin, because before this year, the Australian banks in particular have been very negative towards Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but it looks as if their tune has changed a lot, which is really, really nice to see.
Well, there's been a number of things which have been moving the needle. Probably the biggest of those has been the interest of Senator Bragg and his Senate committee hearing the issues, or willing. The whole Senate's been willing to listen to the issues. They've extended the inquiry. They opened it up to submissions, and there were an astounding number of submissions to the Senate on the issue of debanking, and frank and open and honest submissions from everyone, including the regulator and digital currency representatives, banks even. So there's been a lot said to the Senate, and then their very frank approach to to the issue. The Austracs stepped up their commentary on debanking. So now 3 or 4 times since 2015, Austracs had something to say about it. And so look, there's a number of things happening, and like Bitcoin's just rolling on. I think the banks have basically come to the point where, and we knew it would come, where it just wasn't in their working anymore in their economic interest to stay out of the game.
That's the beautiful thing about the incentives in Bitcoin. Everybody has those economic incentives to simply adopt the network. You can't just sit there and watch all of your competitors get richer and richer as they adopt Bitcoin. And as the number go up, technology works in Bitcoin, your competitors quickly outpace you and outcompete you. So you simply have to adopt the Bitcoin network, which is a beautiful thing. But circling back to your book that you're thinking about putting together, that sounds really interesting, and you have to let me know if you put all that together and release it, because that's something, when you do look back into monetary history, every single time we've depegged away from gold or we've tried to manipulate the money, it's always collapsed the money and the economy. And that's a big thing that a lot of people don't realize today that are getting into Bitcoin. They don't understand the importance of what we're fixing here. Like, paper-backed currencies have failed hundreds and hundreds of times all throughout history. But I suppose if we would go onto a Bitcoin standard and adopt a form of money that can't be manipulated, can't be inflated, can't be hyperinflated away, the potentials that it could kind of give humanity under a kind of sound money system again are kind of things that we can't really conceptualize yet. So certainly looking forward to that book if you do end up putting it out, Allan. It sounds very interesting.
Yeah, we'll watch this space. Hopefully I get a bit of time freed up after the lawsuits, and hopefully a win. But we'll see how we go. It's not over till the fat lady sings, so they say, right?
That's right. Well, I think we've covered just about everything today surrounding the case. It's been a great chat. I've really enjoyed it. Is there any kind of final comments, or maybe you can let the listeners and the viewers know where they can find you or where they can reach out to you to find more about your case?
Sure. Look, I'm trying to be as busy as I can on Twitter. So I've got an account that I called Debanked but not Deterred. But it's at Allan_W_Flynn. But look, if you use the search word debanked on Twitter, you'll find me pretty soon. I'm among the top 5 on that subject. But yeah, we've got a website set up with a couple of friends have assisted set up a website to crowdfund legal expenses for the matters. So that's been running for a couple of months. But look, if anyone feels like supporting the cause, swing by Twitter. Got a link in the bio to a webpage where, trying to get as much information about debanking in Australia and internationally as possible. And there's a link to the crowdfunding page from there. So look, if anyone feels like checking out, follow me on Twitter. There'll be plenty of updates on the matters as they proceed. So yeah, look, we're expecting some kind of decision between now and Christmas. Not sure when. These things can take weeks to decide and then write up, and then who knows where it goes from there.
All we can say is good luck with everything, Allan. I'm sure there's some plebs out there who've heard your story, and I'm sure they'd be happy to help you out, because it's certainly a thing that people just simply shouldn't be discriminated against just because they're helping people buy and sell Bitcoin. That's absurd. But so I'll definitely include your Twitter handle in the show notes below. So any listeners, you'll be able to find Allan on Twitter. I do have to say, I love your Twitter handle, debanked but not deterred. That made me giggle the first time I saw it. So thank you so much for coming on, Allan. It's been an absolute blast, and I'll no doubt see you on Twitter.
Okay, thanks, Luke. Pleasure to talk.
You too. Thank you.